Few things to disclose today are Vecna, the Mephistopheles Wargate, frozen lake incident, and the hand. There's a rock lake near Fort McCoy, Wisconsin that has tunnels going underneath it and to it, and it has black mounds that are on the bottom of it, and it's a burial ground actually for King and Queen Nephilim tombs and dead giants. Now there's a Mormon military project there to go into the lake through a tunnel and collect the Nephilim bones at the bottom of it. I was tasked with retrieving a Pandora's box of sorts at the bottom, and this held a Nephilim mummified hand. And when it was taken from the floor, it triggered an interdimensional event and security measure, and a black goose snake was released from the lake perimeter and cut into my side like a knife. That's also shown in Snow White. And this hand is also in other movies and in ancient cult, and it's shown in Iron Fist as an ancient cult called the Hand. And this also relates to that event and the NWO plans of Kazakhstan, Ukrainian-backed and funded, and this yellow pyramid building that is got a giant handprint in gold inlaid in it, and it's a dome-looking glass tower pyramid that's on display for the city. These will be digitally cloud-linked Luciferian cities in their plans and architecture. So the ritual that was done at this place, at Fort McCoy, infected anyone who touched the hand. And one of them was my father, and he had an altar instilled into him that was called Captain Howdy Hands afterwards. And when he'd stare at his idle hand and it would start shaking, he'd get panic-stricken, like he couldn't move, and then he'd completely shift into this cruel altar after his hand wouldn't stop shaking. Another strange place is the 1932 Reserve in the Lake of Oz, and this was a mob torture facility compound ran by Lucifer himself that was making blood oath drinks that were stronger than strange fire. Many primes were tortured there, and an ancient witch from the Garden of Eden times named Azura has been a time-hopping thorn in many sides, along with Pleiade 1, which the Mormons list in their genealogy with Adam 2. And since the 80s, there's been spirit tech utilized to transfer bodies and uploads into crafts and containment units and tubes that can be transported and movable in their nature. It can splinter cells, and it can preserve cells, create a stasis chamber effect, and destabilize and separate the connection and finite substrates between the spirit and soul. Compositions. And the soul will always have a seat in the mind and the consciousness, like a radio signal, more than the spirit, because the spirit's out doing the Father's business usually, if it's a redeemed and consecrated and sanctified vessel for good and for heaven. So the decoupling effect that this spirit tech can have on people is it can leave imprints of fear into objects, in body transfers, and even fire marks if the body transfer death process doesn't go smoothly. And many of the primes and assets have resurrected from death several times, some with spirit tech, some with angelic counterparts vested within themselves, some with divine intervention and the help of angels, and others merely by the grace of God, preserving them and sustaining them and their compartmentalizations into the timeline as long as their spirit accepts and is allowed and is sanctioned. So the spirit needs to accept, recognize, and work in tandem with God Yahweh's timeline for the congruency to have balance and stabilizing factors and be of good use in this plane. So outside of this Emerald City Ascension Island protocol and other transhumanistic efforts to sustain reanimated soldiers, there's an army that has circumvented diabolical means and abuses and are waiting, we're like walking miracles to testify and magnify that there's already resurrection power working within them, within us as children of God. Now the Umbrella Academy shows a truth where Klaus at one scene is brought into a ghost box and a mausoleum and left by a supposed Russian cybernetic father figure that he doesn't realize is not fully human because of the longing desire for parental units and to fill the void, and the kids that were created for the programs. So experiments were done on kids to drown them, to record their near-death experiences, and research how long they would linger between states of consciousness, between this world and the afterlife, and to tag and to track them. And there was a group that was never killed, though, out of this. And a group that could use hundreds of bodies, just like the Traveler series shows, and that kept resurrecting from life to life and somehow stayed corded and connected to their original selves. And their DNA would be straightened out and healed, no matter how many times they got infected by interdimensionals or other types of injections or infections on and off world. These kids were able to use holotech, masking tech, cloaking tech, and Supreme Global Command System units of operation, sometimes downgrading their own DNA for protective measures, starfire injections, etc. And if fallen ones are in the forms of human bodies, just think about that, then you can be guaranteed that Abba has allowed certain angelic souls to counter this and is concerned and involved in this warfare and moves players around on his chessboard. And the blind worldly eyes who don't see this at play, and whatever the enemy is doing and advancing in and copying, you can be guaranteed that God can and always has and always will be able to do whatever the enemy is doing better. Because they're copycats. They're mimickers. Once you can wrap your head around this, then you can understand why he said we'll do even greater things than him. Only through him, of course. And, I've known people who have died and come back to life. I've died and come back to life. I've seen a body resurrected. And I've resurrected a body. And I myself have been resurrected. And I've known other people who have done the same things. God willing. So the counterfeit of this would be like voodoo and necromancy primarily, which is why they have high-ranking occultists embedded into certain sectors of the unidentified and identified secret access programs, and working in tandem with dark scientists. So it's why some of you that were at the Echelon 7 to 10 Faraday Cage Stadium event in 2010 feel like your systems are failing and falling apart because you've come back from death to life. Literally, you have seen Hades in the grave and lived to see another day. So congratulations, you're experiencing time wall walk through Herkheimer effects, essentially, and time body line sync, which pulls at the current self and station of identity if you don't find potential rest. So it's a conglomeration of gathering all of your essences. And thus there's Echelon 7 through 10 that we've been involved with, and we have combated the 4th through 7th Reich. You're experiencing many things right now, but just know that your brain has elasticity, and you're tested for structural capacity and operational capacity and structural integrity. So whatever it is that you need to let go of, just let go of, so that you can walk in the freedom the Spirit of God has given us, and to go boldly with him, spirit forward, making waves and raising standards of righteousness against the evildoers. And you guys have done the impossible already, and the best is yet to come, so don't give up. Just because the world's heavy, just cast it off. And anything that's dead weight, and be made new each day, because that's the Lord of hosts' promise. To quicken, to resurrect, to redeem, to restore, to liberate, to bring hope, light, and rectification, to give us glorified bodies. We've already seen our avatar bodies, some of us. But most of all, he wants us to come into the unity of full restoration and eventual wholeness in a way that we've never yet seen, because only he knows our perfected state. That's before him in potentiality as we draw closer to him, and the Elohim aren't finished with us yet, because they're our perfect divine family in heaven who we came from and who we have longed for this whole time. And it's motherly and fatherly love and perfect union and brotherhood and sisterhood. Portal jumps, time breaches happen because of their other quantum lattice patterns, People who have strung a line through time and lived to see, like, say, 1,000-year gap of history in time, they carry within them a quantum lattice pattern. And it's like their own bodies are becoming or became like the rock that would be thrown into the stream or the pond, and it eventually affected the entire stream or river or whole system. So those who have carried time, moved through time, and bent time are the ones that have to have quantum oversight to ensure national security sometimes, even for this very reason. Now, Mephistopheles rune, the Mephistopheles Gate, Warsaw, Truman Lake, was one of these instances, and there was interdimensional splits that not only caused the lake itself to split, but the environment and the sky around this hell breach, and the ice and everything that cracked. Ice and sky. When something like this happens, an area will be quarantined and observed for quite some time until a stabilized equilibrium is reached. It's like a window cracks in the sky when big events like this happen. Otherwise, someone could walk through a time worm string chaotic pattern that is fluctuating in the atmosphere. And these things you can see with spirit eyes and with certain tech, and they coagulate around certain knotted matter areas. So the area needs to be discharged of the space-time event and the collision and collapse the wave function. And those who are retracing your steps have experiences of knots being untied, like an infinity loop 8, that you're untying from the middle as you go over your own patterns and your own timelines. The knots will just eventually dissolve and things will come to a neutral halt and state. So don't fear. Back to the Future, Fort Scott was another one of these areas, Great Scott. Onto St. Jude. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, and the song Hey Jude was used on a Sergeant Jude at Fort Leonard Wood. Dr. Fort Leonard Wood. What this did, that song, is it instilled a female alter, a transvestite alter, female persona that would get under the sergeant's skin. She would get under his skin and make things better. He was training the Centurion program kids in the Super and Secret Space program, and also transporting weapons from various places and setting up FEMA camps. And he got fragmented in the process, to say the least. He contained within his compartmentalization the Hydra files and went through a ritual that brought an underworld entity that was octopus and spider in nature, that is called Vecna on Stranger Things. He wouldn't comply with certain procedures and was dishonorably discharged. So he blamed an 11-year-old in the program instead of getting help that he needed, or just leaving peacefully. And he carried within him attachment, the worst one, which was Vecna. Through the ritual that they did with him, black rites programming and breaking. They did certain fragmentation and breaking down of cycles. So whenever we would see a transvestite person that we knew was fragmented, those in the programs, we knew that they were some of the most dangerous people because of the severe splits. So we stayed away from them. But he didn't present this female persona to the kids, so they didn't know about it quite yet. So one day, Mighty Jude convinced me nicely that he was going to move me to a wonderful place, safe and sound, and no one would harm us. We'd get out of the program, have a great new life, a great new start. Everybody would just do what they wanted. We could get the others out eventually, but it was a secret for now. And he had plans and maps and was very manipulative, conniving, and convincing. And what stood before me was his normal, intelligent, military self and uniform standing there. And he was making sense of his plans, and his mind seemed sane. And I trusted him just like Vecna in Stranger Things, who was an older male in the program. So his lying and conniving worked, and I got in a truck with him thinking it was going to be freedom, but it turned out to be a kidnapping hostage situation instead, and that his mastermind had planned. So I later found out this was a mistake. He had red carpet in his switched out semi when we switched vehicles, black women's dress shoes, red dresses, red wig, nylons, etc. And this guy was a freak show with completely walled off split personalities unbeknownst to St. Jude. So I spent 3 days lost in his altars and holding back this sergeant's demons, and kept the female one awake, as draining as it was, so that the other ones wouldn't lash out at me. And I just kept her talking about things and about her being a mother and how she wanted a mother and pretended to be a mother, etc. So the worst altar that Sergeant Jude had was when Vecna fully manifested and a portal opened up in the semi-truck cab, and it was purple and black stars in this portal, and the octopus spider entity manifested behind him, and it raged in your face. So what happened was I barely slept due to the hypervigilance from trying to deal with this person's altars and the spiritual warfare that was at play, and I was praying and blacked out for a while. So Yahushua showed up when that entity manifested and was raging through him. And it was like a black eclipse happened in this semi-truck cab. And when Yahushua showed up, he eclipsed that darkness and stood right in front of it. And it was like me being backed up into a dark corner. The light of God coming into that space and seeing these tentacles and all these crazy things, and the full manifestation of a monster manifesting in a portal opening event through his mind and through his body that was tethered to him, because they always have to have an anchor point. And the light of God eclipsed everything and brought calmness, brought peace, and brought liberation to the situation. So right after that, I took Yahushua's hand and stepped outside of the semi-truck cab, thinking that maybe I had died, maybe he had already killed me, maybe the monster that manifested from this interdimensional opening had taken me to a different void space or something. I was really out of it at this moment. So I was found by my team. I opened the semi-truck cab. James Casbolt shook my shoulders, called me by my childhood name, and kept saying, "Rua, are you okay?" And then eventually I started talking. I was taken back, rehabilitated for 2 weeks at the base, and good old Sergeant Jude Vecna was mind wiped and later contacted me via phone as a teenager. And in this instance, years later, I was still in amnesia, and I knew that I recognized this person's voice and the encouraging words and the intelligence that was behind it and what he was saying. And we ended up meeting at a place called Hemingway's, and he showed up to this place in a red dress, red wig, which triggered me initially, and then I went back into this childhood trauma with him. And I don't know if it was him that was doing this on purpose or if somebody was controlling him to do this, but that's what he showed up as. So I actually had to call someone for help because I went into a carry altar and ended up cracking the glass on this humongous fish tank that was on the wall at the bar. So long story short, if you're not in control of your mind, someone or something else will be. And this is a seedbed for unforgiveness to grow when that happens. So I'm going to stop here so I can do a next part on the roots of bitterness and just how hard it is to forgive sick people like this. But what it really boils down to is forgiving, which helps you move on, and that facilitates healing and sanity. Otherwise, the only other choice is is living and lying in those entanglements of bitterness, which broods hate eventually. And to seek God's shalom that will guard your heart and guard your mind and help you out of any monstrous situation that you've been through. And put words to it. And He'll put words to the groanings and the murmurings of your soul that human words can't even put into play. That's why people speak in tongues, because it helps. So forgive and let go and let God. And He'll eclipse any darkness.